Welcome back, children. Today we are going to begin with a new chapter, Basic Problems of an Economy. In this chapter, we are going to learn about the different economic problems, the reasons behind these economic problems, the three main questions that arises because of these problems, and the solutions to these problems, the ways and methods to solve these problems. We are also going to learn about economic development and economic growth. Let's begin with the problems and the causes behind them. The problems in an economy basically arises because of the unlimited human wants. Our wants are never ending. We go on needing things in its various shapes and size. A particular commodity which has a particular use are proffered or catered to us in various different ways and various different types, size, shapes. Let's take an example of a refrigerator. When it first came into the market, it was a single door refrigerator. Then it evolved into a bigger one with larger capacity to hold many more things. After that, it got evolved into double door. Why double door? The upper compartment was basically made to refrigerate or as a freezer, and the lower compartments were used as ordinary refrigerators. After that, the evolution came in the way of three doors, where a vegetable compartment was introduced at the bottom so that cooked food and vegetables and refrigeration or freezers can be kept separate. Okay. Then came the almirah type ones, which had two doors which opened against each other. Capacities were huge to satisfy all our wants. After that came the water dispenser ones, where you can get chilled and cold water directly from outside the refrigerator. A dispenser was attached to the refrigerator outside the door. Then came the convertible ones, where you can convert the vegetable rack into a freezer or a freezer into a vegetable rack. Now the question comes that the purpose of this particular thing is only one, that is refrigeration. Then why do we need so many various types of it? The answer to this is because of our unlimited wants. This is just an example which I have put forth. Like this, if you think about almost all commodities which we use, you will find the various evolutions that it has passed through. And the reason behind all this evolution is only one thing, that is our unlimited wants. The problem would have ended there if this unlimited wants could have been satisfied with unlimited resources. But that is not so. The resources with which this particular commodities are made are limited. They are continuously getting depleted because of the overuse. Because the resources are scarce, the problem arises. On the top of that, these scarce resources are required to satisfy all our unlimited wants. So there are three problems that basically cripples an economy. First, resources are limited. Second, our wants are unlimited. And the third, with this limited resources, the unlimited wants has to be satisfied. Okay? Now there are three main economic questions that arise because of these problems. The first question is what to produce. Because our wants are unlimited and the resources are limited, so we have to give it a thought as to what to produce. What to produce is also an explanation to how much to be produced. Okay, so this is actually a combination of two questions, that is what commodities are supposed to be produced and how much of that commodity is supposed to be produced. Next, how to produce. How to produce means what methods are supposed to be used to produce these commodities. And the last one is for whom to produce. That means these commodities are supposed to be produced for which particular group of people. Okay? Now let's try to understand these economic questions separately. The first question that we'll come across is what to produce. As I have already said, that this what to produce question comes in two types. That is, which goods are to be produced and in what quantity. We have to keep it in mind that because the resources are limited, the goods that are supposed to be produced should be of use for each and every one of us. Suppose with this limited resources, huge amount of goods are produced and they are not utilized to its full extent. Then what happens? Then the thing that happens is wastage. Okay, so the economy has to think about stopping the wastage. Okay, that means producing the commodities in a limited number so that it satisfies the human wants. Plus, using the resources in such a manner that we have plenty to be used further also. So, only finite amount of a limited number of goods and services can be produced. Is it clear? Okay. So, which commodities are supposed to be produced? The commodities which have a positive levels of production. What is the meaning of positive levels? Positive levels here means the commodities which when produced will be sold out. That means which has a proper demand in the economy. Only those commodities are supposed to be produced. Any commodity which is not in demand, if it is produced, then that commodity goes into wastage. Say, just logically speaking, when you go to a market, you find shops which sells you umbrellas. Now umbrellas in West Bengal are sold all throughout the year. Reason that usually we find rains during rainy season, definitely summers also, and certain times in the month of the winter months also a few of spells of rain is seen. So it can be sold all throughout the year. But if you go to a place where it rarely rains, how many umbrella shops will you get there? You will get umbrella shops to be very rare. Why? Because it is not supposed to be used in those areas. Yeah, keeping in mind that umbrellas are also required during the summer months to ward away the heat or the sunlight. I'm not considering that, only considering the rainfall in this particular case. Okay, so if that particular place where it rains less, huge amount of umbrellas are produced, what will happen to those umbrellas? It will be a waste. Why? Because it will not be sold out and very soon it will be thrown away. What will happen to the resources that were used to make the umbrella? That went into waste. So anything which has an output which is fixed at positive levels are supposed to be produced. Okay? And it want quantities in that quantity where there won't be any wastage. Alright? Now, how do you decide which particular commodity to be produced? It differs from place to place. It differs because of certain reasons. The first reason is differences in the pattern of human wants. Just now I have explained, as per our patterns, like cultural factors. How much do you expect saris to be produced in America? Few. Why? People there don't use saris in the same way as Indian women use it. Isn't it? So saris are going to be produced more in India rather than in America. Okay, it also depends upon our geographical factors. How geographical factors? There are countries which basically have rice as the staple food. Why? Because rice is easier to be produced in those geographical areas. Okay, and there are countries where wheat becomes a staple food. Why? Because wheat is more produced in those countries. So definitely the preference patterns differ. Bread can be a form of a food for us, but it is not a staple food. But bread is definitely a staple food in Western countries because of the differences in the production of wheat and rice in India and the Western countries. Is it clear? Okay. Then the next one we see is differences in resource. This is also very correct. Difference in resource. Countries which have more of mineral resources, those countries will be producing the commodities which are being produced with the help of those resources. Suppose a country has more oil fields. What will the country do? The country will utilize those oil either by producing commodities out of that oil or by selling it to other countries. Okay. Next, differences in the quantity of production, that is also correct. Because taste preferences differ from country to country. So in that case, how much of a particular commodity will be produced also differs. Just now I gave you an example of wheat and rice being the two different staple foods in two different countries. Now a country where bread is a staple food, that country will produce more of bread. In a country where bread is not a staple food, that country will produce less of bread. So the quantity of production differs depending upon the different needs of that country. Clear? Okay. Then we move on to the next question. The next question is a very interesting one. How to produce? There are so many commodities which are produced, and there are also various ways and methods of producing it. That is the reason we call it choice of techniques. That means we have to choose the technique in which method we will be producing that commodity. A particular way of producing a particular good or service is called a technique of production. Okay, there can be plenty of techniques of production, but usually any economy follows that technique which requires less time, production is more, and the cost of production is also less. That's why profit will be more. Did you understand? Okay. Now, under choice of techniques, we basically get two techniques to choose from. Let's see what are those. One, where the level of technical knowledge is high, or we call it capital intensive. That means these are countries where capital resources are huge. So in that case, if capital resources are huge, capital will be used more in the production. Okay, that means less of labor, more of machines will be used. Clear? Another one is resource availability. Resource availability means labor intensive. Labor intensive. What is the meaning of labor intensive? That means in this particular countries, labor is huge in number. Like overpopulated countries like China, India, we have more of labor. So maximum of our production procedures involves more labor than machines. Even cheap laborers from India are hired in other countries so that they can produce there where labor is less. You'll be surprised to hear that there are countries like Austria. I'm giving only one example to you. There are plenty more of it. These countries pay to married couples so that they can have more than two children, because their population is so less that they suffer because of the lack of labor. The reason why there is a brain drain from India. Brain drain means skilled, learned people moving out of India. You can say the reason is we don't have that proper facilities, or our aspirations are much higher than what we get here in India. That is true. But why is it so? These foreign countries can proffer us, or they can give us with such opportunities because they have less amount of labor with them. That's why we tend to move from this country to the other. Did you understand? Okay. So as I was saying, there are usually two techniques. One is capital intensive, another one is labor intensive. So whichever country has more of capital and less of labor will be using capital intensive, and whichever country has less of capital and more of labor will be using labor intensive technologies. Okay. Now the last question which we are going to discuss today is for whom to produce. For whom to produce means the commodities are supposed to be produced for which particular group of people. The problem of deciding the manner in which the produced goods and services will be used. So this is the problem. That means it is also known as problem of distribution. That means it will be distributed among which group of people. Now this is also solved by certain rules in the society, like solution through government decisions, like it happens in countries like which are socialist, like countries like China, where the entire decision is taken by the government. Government even decides which colleges the children will go to study. So the distribution of all the commodities lies completely within the hands of the government. The government decides. Next, there can be social customs which can deal with this problem. Social customs like we have in certain villages of India till date, like the king or the chief gets the maximum of a produce, then goes to the priests, and then goes to say the person who is tilling the land and producing the farmers rather. So social customs can also solve this problem to a certain extent, even though it's discriminatory, but still. And the last solution is a market mechanism, which is usually found in capitalist or rich countries, or socialist and capitalist countries which are punched together like mixed economy, which is India. Market mechanism means it happens in the market itself, where the demand for a commodity is determined and the supply of that commodity is also determined. Do you remember when Maggie came into news because of the problem of some unwanted material being found in either its masala or in its top coating? What happened at that time? The demand for Maggie, because people came to know there was something which is dangerous for their health, so they stopped eating it. So what happened? Nothing. Demand for Maggie fell. Okay, that time the thing that happened is Maggie was shunned by almost everybody. So people stopped using it or eating it. So much Maggie was wasted, and so many of the packets prices were reduced. Means the prices of Maggie packets which were say 5 rupees at that time, even they were sold at say around 2 rupees, 2 rupees 50 paisa, means half the price and even lower than this, so that those can be sold out and there is less of wastage. So the demand fell and gradually the production of Maggie was also lowered. But then when Maggie came out clear of all these things, all these problems, when Maggie proved that it did not have anything harmful, the very next moment what happened? Again the demand for Maggie rose. It rose to a huge extent. So once the demand for Maggie rose, people started buying it and the producers started producing more of it and supplying more. So did you understand the thing? That means this is market mechanism where the market itself decides how much to produce because of the demand, or seeing how much is the particular thing in demand in the market, that much is produced and supplied in the market. Alright, so market mechanism also decides upon which particular areas are supposed to be provided with which particular type of commodities and goods. So this is all for today. We are going to explain the next part on the next day in the next class. Thank you very much, children.